Imagine standing at the edge of an ancient auditorium, the stones beneath your feet worn smooth by generations seeking wisdom. A hush falls as a lone scholar ascends the dais, her voice a whisper that carries the weight of forbidden knowledge. Tonight she doesn't lecture on philosophy or math. She speaks a single syllable, a word so potent it crackles in the air like captured lightning. In that instant, the boundaries between thought and world blur, and reality shivers under the power of her voice. In the waning days of Alexandria's great library, there lived a philosopher named Hypatia. History remembers her brilliance in geometry and astronomy, but legend insists her final act was something far stranger. As a hostile mob closed in, she delivered one last oration, not on circles or stars, but on language itself. They say she uttered a hidden curse, binding her fate to the very stones of the city. Whether truth or myth, the story hangs like a ghost in our minds. Words that transcend the page, crossing into the realm of miracles and nightmares. What if Hypatia's legend isn't just a dramatic flourish? What if somewhere, tucked away in charred scrolls and whispered rumors, lie the instructions for true alchemy of speech? Every century, seekers have risked everything to chase that promise. Priests chanting in candlelit crypts, mystics carving runes into cold granite, poets scribbling mantras on blood-drenched parchment. They believed a phrase could warp time, summon storms, or heal the deepest wounds of the soul. Yet most of us brush off such tales as fanciful folklore. We speak casually. "Good morning. Be right back. I'm sorry," unaware that these tiny spells shape our emotions, attract opportunities, or lock us into patterns of thought. Modern science even hints at this power. Studies reveal that affirmations can rewire neural pathways, and that the tone of your voice alters listeners' heart rates. But what if science is merely rediscovering an art lost to us, an ancient craft that once held reality in its palm? I invite you to lean closer and consider the possibility that language is more than a tool for exchange. Think of your mind as a forge, where thoughts are molten metal. Words are the hammer and anvil chiseling raw ideas into form. When you speak with intention, you shape not just your own perceptions, but the very fabric of existence. The question isn't whether words carry power, it's how deep that power runs, how far it reaches into worlds both seen and unseen. Tonight we'll begin to unravel that mystery. We'll sift through the ashes of forgotten libraries, brush dust off crumbling glyphs, and listen for the echo of Hypatia's final lecture. We'll explore why certain phrases became talismans of transformation, while others fell into silence, feared or suppressed by those who sensed their force. And we'll glimpse the edge of a truth so profound that once you acknowledge it, you can never return to the mundane comfort of thinking, speech is harmless. But I won't unveil every secret in one breath. The whispers you seek lie in deeper chambers, guarded by puzzles of symbolism and subtle rituals. Each word you hear tonight is a footprint leading you toward that hidden sanctuary. By the end of our journey, you may find your own voice resonating with a newfound power, capable of bending, shifting, even remaking the reality you thought was fixed. So hold that thought. What if your next word could open a door you've never dared to knock on? Keep your senses alert and your heart open. Our path winds through shadows and light, secrets half-glimpsed and riddles left unsolved. When you speak again, you may discover that reality itself listens and answers back. Buried for millennia beneath shifting dunes, the true birthplace of spellcraft lies not in grand temples or ivory towers, but in the shadowy corridors of the city of the dead at Saqqara. Here, between rows of silent tombs and the skeletal remains of forgotten kings, archaeologists recently uncovered fragments of an ancient papyrus scroll reshaped by time and by fire. What scholars once dismissed as mere mortuary prayers are now revealing passages of incantation, formulas that twist language into a living force. The scroll's faded glyphs speak of car-shapers who commanded not only spirits, but the very essence of life and death. In one fragment, A priest invokes the breath of Geb to heal a warrior's shattered sinews. In another, he beseeches Thoth's tongue to ward off unseen threats. At first glance, these lines seemed ritual niceties, pious flourishes to appease the gods. Yet under closer scrutiny, a pattern emerges. Each phrase is crafted with mathematical precision, repeating consonants and vowels in ratios that mirror the cycles of the moon and the movement of stars. This discovery forces us to rethink what we believed about early magic. We've long imagined spellweavers as solitary eccentrics, scribbling random symbols in dim corners. But the Saqqara text suggests a sophisticated tradition, one that united linguistics, astronomy, and philosophy in a single, unified practice. For the Egyptians, words were not arbitrary labels. They were extensions of divine thought, tools to align human will with cosmic order. Each utterance, properly intoned, tuned the speaker's consciousness to the rhythms of the universe. Why, then, did these teachings vanish from the world's collective memory? Partly because of the very power they held. As empires rose and fell, scribes guarded their secrets jealously, transferring knowledge only to initiates deemed worthy. When conquerors overran the Nile Valley, they scorched libraries and silenced temples, branding native rites as heresy. Later scholars, steeped in new belief systems, catalogued what survived as funerary poetry, overlooking the deliberate symmetry and hidden codes woven into the text. Even in modern times, the notion that words could possess intrinsic energy has flirted on the edges of academia, only to be swept aside by the rise of empirical science. Language is just a tool, we were taught, not the genesis of reality, but a convenient veneer. Yet the Saqqara inscriptions whisper a different truth, that our ancestors recognized language as the golden thread stitching together mind, matter, and spirit. Consider the philosopher Iamblichus, who traveled to Egypt in the 3rd century CE. He wrote of secret chambers where hieroglyphs glowed under torchlight, chanting back to those who read them. His contemporaries dismissed these tales as flights of fancy, until now. The recent digs at Saqqara vindicate his vision, reminding us that truth often hides in plain sight, masked by layers of skepticism and the dust of ages. As we translate and decode these ancient verses, we unearth more than words. We uncover a living philosophy that treated every syllable as sacred geometry. The car shapers believed that to speak was to act, to will into being the very shape of reality. In their hands, language became a bridge between worlds, a conduit for energies both subtle and immense. Yet this knowledge remains fragile. The sands continue to claim their due, and each papyrus fragment recovered is a victory against oblivion. As we piece together the full picture, we not only honor those long-vanished voices, but also rekindle a spark of their awareness in our own. The question isn't simply what these spells could do for ancient priests. It's what they might awaken within us today, if we dare to learn their true meaning, buried deep beneath the sands. Every incantation at its most elemental level is a woven tapestry of 3 strands: the physical mark of ink on parchment, the fiery spark of intention in the practitioner's mind, and the resonant current of power that sweeps outward into the world. Together, these strands form an alchemical triangle, each side supporting the others, each incapable of manifesting anything on its own. To understand this secret anatomy is to glimpse the blueprint behind every whispered curse, every whispered blessing, and every binding word that history has ever recorded. Ink is more than mere dye. In ancient workshops, scribes ground minerals into fine powders, mixing them with honey or gum arabic until the concoction bore a lustrous sheen. Each color carried symbolic weight: red for life and blood, black for the abyss and the unknown, green for growth and renewal. But beyond symbolism, the very act of inscribing a symbol arrested time in its tracks. A rune carved hastily in sand might vanish with the tide, but ink pressed into vellum said, "This word is eternal." Our ancestors believed that by fixing a word onto a tangible medium, they anchored intention in the world, giving it a vessel through which to act. Intention is the furnace in which raw desire is forged into focused will. It's not enough to scrawl a name or a phrase. The mind must converge all its energy into that moment of utterance. Here, stories of John Dee and his Enochian conjurings serve as a stark warning. Dee, the 16th century polymath, believed he had unlocked a celestial language revealed to him by angels. Night after night, he recorded conversations with otherworldly beings, transcribing symbols whose meanings he barely comprehended. Yet his discipline was unmatched. He spent hours entering a trance, aligning every breath with the cadence of those cryptic letters. The cautionary detail comes from the journals of his scryer, Edward Kelly, who claimed they nearly tore open a portal between realms. When Dee's intention grew too grand, too unmoored by understanding, the boundary between the human and the divine trembled and nearly broke. Power, the final pillar, is the invisible tide that carries a spell from parchment into reality. It is neither inherently benevolent nor malevolent. Like electricity, it surges where it finds a conduit. To tune into that current, ancient adepts employed chants, gestures, and breathing techniques designed to attune the body's subtle energies to the rhythm of nature. They spoke of a vibrational harmony linking all living things, a lattice-work of energy that responded to precise frequencies. In that lattice, every word has a pitch, every syllable a waveform. When spoken with clarity and force, an incantation can send ripples through the ether, calling forth change. Yet this anatomy does not reveal itself easily. Early modern scholars, enthralled by rationalism, dismissed these practices as superstition, never noticing how their own scientific revolution echoed the same principles. Consider the modern engineer who writes code. Each variable, each function name must be exact. A single typo can crash an entire program. In the same way, a misplaced stroke in a magical glyph or a mispronounced vowel can shift the outcome from triumph to disaster. That parallel reminds us that precision matters, whether we engineer circuits or conjure essences. But why, you might wonder, did these teachings fade into obscurity, only to resurface in fragmentary form? The answer lies partly in the attitude of power. For rulers and religious authorities, the possibility that a word could reshape reality was deeply threatening. Imagine a populace armed with true words of healing, protection, or vengeance. Better to consign these arts to the realm of myth, dismiss them as quaint fable. So texts were hidden, scrolls were burned, and those who dared practice saw their libraries confiscated. Spells survived only in coded ballads, in the margins of manuscripts or under the polished veneer of ceremonial protocol. In recent decades, researchers have begun to question the myth label. Digital humanities projects have uncovered hidden glosses in medieval manuscripts, annotations in the margins that map out phonetic patterns long thought accidental. Physicists studying cymatics have shown how certain sound frequencies can produce intricate patterns in sand or water, echoing the shapes of ancient sigils. Neuroscientists chart how mantra recitation alters brainwave activity, promoting states of deep focus and relaxation. All these clues point to a reality older than our textbooks, that intentional sound, words paired with understanding, can indeed interface with the machinery of the cosmos. Yet even now much remains veiled. We have ink, we have intention, we have glimpses of power, but we lack the full lexicon that guided the car-shapers of Saqqara or the Enochian scholars of Elizabethan England. The page of knowledge turned, and we glimpsed only the next chapter before the wind whisked the parchment away. To reclaim that knowledge, we must become both archaeologists and philosophers, dusting off ancient fragments, decoding their symbolic logic, and rediscovering the philosophical underpinnings that made those communities see language as sacred geometry. There is a reason this path is not widely taught. Genuine mastery demands humility, patience, and an ethical compass. The same incantation that mends a broken spirit can be twisted into a weapon, if wielded by the unbalanced. And though technology offers shortcuts, audio loops and smartphone apps promising instant manifesting, true power arises only when each component of the triangle is balanced. Ink sustained by substance and specificity, intention sharpened by clarity, power guided by purpose. So the anatomy of every incantation remains for now a tantalizing blueprint. We know the bones of the structure, but the flesh still eludes us. In the next segment, we will explore how those who walked this path before distilled these elements into living rituals, and how the same frameworks can animate our daily lives. Until then, carry these three seeds, ink, intention, and power, within your awareness. They are the keys to a door long sealed, a door that, once opened, may reveal the hidden machinery of reality itself. In the tapestry of human history, spells have often been dismissed as quaint superstitions or theatrical parlor tricks, yet their threads continue to weave through our modern lives in surprising ways. Take, for instance, the curious case of a 17th-century love spell cast by a cunning Cornish witch named Morwenna Penrose. According to local lore, she stood on the cliffs overlooking Falmouth Harbour, chanting a ritual so precise that an inbound ship's crew inexplicably altered course, perhaps drawn by the pull of her words, or by a sudden fog that wrapped them in a cloak of confusion. Skeptics scoffed, sailors whispered of unseen currents, and centuries later, the legend still pulses with the question, did Morwenna truly bend fate that evening, or did she simply exploit the fears and expectations of those who heard her call? This story captures attention at the heart of all spellcraft, the interplay between outward effect and inner belief. On one hand, we can point to environmental factors, shifting tides, capricious weather, human suggestion, as prosaic explanations. On the other, we must acknowledge that Morwenna's ritual held people's attention, focused their intent, and perhaps even altered their perceptions so profoundly that what happened aboard that ship became real in their minds, and therefore real in history. In modern parlance, we might call this a nocebo effect, the flip side of the placebo, where negative expectations produce tangible outcomes. In casting her love spell, Morwenna tapped into a hidden lever of human psychology, binding the beliefs of her targets as surely as any incantation. Yet ancient spells were rarely theatrical stunts. They were woven from the very fabric of culture and philosophy. In medieval Europe, for example, the concept of sympathetic magic held that objects could influence one another across distance through imagined or symbolic links, a lock of hair, a carved effigy, a piece of parchment inscribed with a person's name. This principle mirrors today's understanding of mirror neurons and empathy, the same neural pathways that light up when we watch someone experiencing pain or joy, allow us to sense, even co-create emotional states in those around us. When a shaman chanted over a totem, they weren't tapping into mystical forces so much as leveraging the deep resonance between mind and world that every human shares. Modern science even circles back to these ancient insights. A 2024 study on affirmation and stress reduction found that volunteers repeating personalized, positive self-statements experienced measurable drops in cortisol levels, improved heart rate variability, and sharper focus on tasks, outcomes strikingly reminiscent of the healing spells written on Egyptian papyri. While the study framed these affirmations in psychological terms, the mechanism echoes the same structure we saw at Saqqara. Spoken words anchored by intent, activating an internal cascade that ripples outward. The difference lies only in terminology. Where the ancients spoke of invoking the breath of Geb, we talk about mind-body coherence. But if these parallels exist, why do many still regard spellcraft as a relic of ignorance? Part of the answer stems from cultural bias. As scientific materialism rose to dominance, Anything that didn't fit neatly into measurable categories was relegated to the fringes. Alchemy became chemistry without the mystery. Ritual became theatre without the sacred, and myth became childhood fantasy. Ironically, this dismissal obscured the very real intersections between ritual practice and emerging fields like neuroscience, psychology, and systems theory. It took centuries for the notion that words could influence neural plasticity to gain mainstream traction. Another misconception is the idea that ancient magic was uncontrollable or dangerous, an image fueled by sensationalized trials of alleged witches and demonic invocations. Yet for many practitioners, magic was governed by strict ethical codes and intricate protocols. A Roman augur would follow elaborate procedures to interpret the flight of birds. A Chinese Taoist master would recite sutras in exact tonal patterns. A Viking Saidkona would bind her own eyesight in competence to enter the otherworld. These safeguards reveal that the true power of spellcraft was never in casting the wildest invocation, but in mastering nuance, understanding the boundaries between self and other, cause and effect, seen and unseen. In our own era, technology offers us new mirrors for these ancient lessons. Consider how social media algorithms respond to the language we use. A single phrase or emoji can trigger waves of content recommendation, shaping what millions see next. Our words online, typed or spoken, can manifest digital realities, trends, movements, even market shifts. When a hashtag goes viral, it functions much like a communal spell, aligning collective attention and altering the reality of the internet. We've inherited an age-old truth: the right utterance at the right time can reshape the contours of our shared world. Even in everyday life, the mechanics of intention echo mystical frameworks. Athletes use visualization scripts to rehearse peak performance, reciting internal narratives that prime motor neurons for action. Entrepreneurs draft mission statements that become self-fulfilling prophecies. Couples craft vows, binding their wills through poetic pledges. Each of these modern rituals carries the same DNA as the rites of old: words as vessels for intention, belief as the catalyst for transformation. Yet there is a caution buried in every spell, ancient or modern. Words can heal, but they can also wound. A careless remark can linger in memory, shaping self-image and behavior for years. A misaligned affirmation can reinforce anxiety rather than dissolve it. The scholar Hypatia may have uttered a curse in her final hours, but her true legacy lies in the geometry of her mind, the precision of her thought. She understood that language squares the circle between logic and mystery, and that whether one speaks a curse or a blessing, the architect remains the same, the mind behind the words. So what does this mean for us standing at the crossroads of ancient wisdom and contemporary science? It means that the divide between magic and mindset is far thinner than we imagine. The rituals of long-forgotten car shapers or English conjurers are not relics but prototypes, early models of practices we still use whenever we harness the power of our voice and our beliefs. To say that spells still shape our world is not to invoke fantasy, but to acknowledge that language, intention, and communal focus continue to mold the landscape of human experience. In the next segment, we'll shift from theory to practice, guiding you through a simple, accessible ritual that channels these same principles. You'll see how a handful of spoken words, when aligned with your deepest purpose, can become a tool for clarity, transformation, and even protection. But before we proceed, take a moment to consider your own relationship with words, how you speak to others, and more importantly, how you speak to yourself. For in those private conversations lies the seed of every grand spell ever cast. A few years ago, a modern witch named Rowan faced a familiar foe. Writer's block so stubborn it felt like an iron gate between her thoughts and the page. Desperate, she turned to a distilled version of the ancient spells we've explored, no elaborate ceremonies, no rare ingredients, just 3 simple actions anyone could follow. Within days, she'd broken through her block, the words flowing again as if a hidden dam had burst. I've adapted her formula into a beginner's mini spell ritual, one you can weave into your daily life to spark clarity, creativity, or calm. First, choose a moment when the world feels too loud or your mind too fractured. Pause whatever you're doing, pause scrolling, pause multitasking, and bring your full attention inward. Sit or stand comfortably, letting your spine lengthen and your shoulders soften. No special tools are required. Rowan's breakthrough came with nothing more than a scrap of paper, a pen, and her own focused will. By removing all distractions, you create the mental stillness that ancient adepts called the sacred venue for magic. Next, craft your incantation. Rowan wrote a single, precise sentence. Words flow freely from my heart to the page. Notice how it names both the obstacle and the desired outcome. In this formula, your words become a bridge between intention and reality. Don't worry about poetic flourish. Plain, honest language carries greater force than lofty rhetoric. The key is clarity. As you write your phrase, imagine it not as ink on paper, but as a living waveform vibrating with purpose. Once your words are written, breathe life into them. Fold the paper in half and hold it between your hands. Close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. With each inhale, feel your mind drawing in focus. With each exhale, feel tension and doubt slipping away. On the 3rd exhale, speak your incantation out loud, steady, deliberate, and unhurried. Let each syllable land as firmly as a stone on water, sending ripples of intention into the unseen. Rowan's ritual didn't end there, and neither should yours. Ancient practitioners often used a simple gesture, a touch to the heart or a raised hand, to anchor the energy of the spell in their own bodies. After speaking her words, she pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the warmth beneath her skin. That tiny physical act locks the incantation into your nervous system, transforming abstract hope into embodied certainty. Finally, release your spell into the world. Unfold the paper and place it somewhere meaningful, tucked inside your notebook, perched on your desk under your laptop, or held within the pages of a book you open every morning. This placement isn't magic. It's a reminder, a signal to your subconscious that your intention matters. Each time you glimpse the paper, you reinforce your commitment, strengthening the neural pathways that turn intention into action. Now you might wonder, isn't this just a fancy affirmation? To a degree, yes, and yet there's a subtle but crucial distinction. Affirmations often float in the abstract, repeated mechanically without connection to deeper layers of purpose. In contrast, spellcraft, as practiced by Rowan and by ancient adepts, ties words to ritual and ritual to the body. The ink, the breath, the voice, and the gesture form a chain of causality that galvanizes your focus and aligns your mind-body system toward a single goal. Beware the common pitfall of impatience. Many expect instant results, but real transformation often unfolds over days or weeks, not seconds. If at first your incantation feels hollow, revisit your phrasing. Is it truly yours or lifted from someone else's wisdom? Personal ownership infuses the words with power. Another mistake is overcomplication. Adding crystals, candles, or chants borrowed from unrelated traditions can dilute your intent. Keep the ritual lean and centered on your single, clear phrase. Over time, you'll notice subtle shifts. Rowan discovered that after her ritual, ideas that once eluded her sprang unbidden to mind. Tasks that felt burdensome carried new momentum. Even emotional tensions eased as she channeled her energy into intentional speech rather than rumination. These effects mirror the experiences of those early car shapers and English conjurers. The mechanics may be simple, but the interplay between intention and perception reshapes inner landscapes, and from there, the outer world. To integrate this ritual into everyday life, try setting a weekly appointment with yourself, perhaps Sunday evening before the week begins. Or use it as a morning anchor. Before you check your phone, write your incantation, breathe, speak, and place the paper as a talisman for the day ahead. You can also adapt the formula for different needs. Change the wording to invite confidence before a meeting, clarity before study, or calm before sleep. Ultimately, the power of this mini-spell doesn't reside in the paper or the words alone, but in your willingness to honor your own intentions. By pausing, focusing, and articulating your desire, you activate the same principles that guided Hypatia's curse, that shaped the Saqqara texts, and that almost ripped open another dimension in John Dee's circles. We've distilled centuries of practice into a handful of steps, but the essence remains unchanged. When ink, intention, and power converge, the ordinary can become extraordinary. So the next time you feel stuck, creatively, emotionally, or spiritually, remember Rowan's breakthrough and this beginner's ritual. No grand altars, no exotic paraphernalia, just your focused mind, your honest words, and the simple conviction that what you speak can transform your reality. As you fold that paper and speak your phrase, you awaken a dormant truth, that within each of us lies the capacity to shape our own experience, one deliberate word at a time. By now you've walked the hidden corridors of language's power, tracing charred papyri in Saqqara, feeling the tremors of John Dee's Enochian portals, and watching a modern witch shatter her writer's block with nothing more than ink, breath, and belief. These threads, spun across centuries, converge now in a single revelation. Words are more than vessels of thought. They are shields against chaos, swords that carve purpose into the world, and talismans we carry unknowingly in every conversation. Medieval travelers knew this instinctively. They tucked spell stones into their satchels, smooth inscribed pebbles believed to ward off misfortune on dusty roads between kingdoms. Those stones were silent guardians, charged by intention and bound to the carrier's fate. Today, we might leave a stone on a mantle or slip one into a pocket. But what if our true protective charm is not a stone at all, but the very words we speak, phrases forged in ritual and carried in our hearts? Think back to the Saqqara scribes, who arranged glyphs in cosmic harmony to heal and protect. Remember how Hypatia's legendary final lecture bound her spirit to Alexandria's stones. Recall Morwenna Penrose, whose love spell bent the course of ships and our own ritual, where ink and intention converged on a simple scrap of paper to unblock a creative mind. Each of these practices depended on one immutable principle. Language, when wielded with clarity and respect, becomes a living barrier against the unpredictable tides of fate. But power demands responsibility. We've seen how reckless invocation tore at the fabric of reality in Elizabethan experiments, and how careless words in our daily lives can leave scars far deeper than any physical wound. The shield of language only holds when we temper our speech with wisdom and craft our phrases with care. A single misaligned word can crack the armor we build around our hopes and dreams. So how do we carry this shield into the modern world? It begins with awareness. Notice the stories you replay in your mind, the affirmations you murmur in solitude, and the promises you make to others. These are your incantations, spoken and unspoken, weaving patterns of possibility or constricting you in loops of fear. When you catch a thought that feels like a crease in your armor, pause and reshape it. Replace "I can't" with "I choose to." "I'm stuck" with "I'm learning," and "What if I fail" with "What if I succeed?" Next, anchor your words in ritual. You don't need incense or altar stones, just the commitment to pause and speak with intention. Fold a piece of paper, write your protective phrase, "I am guided and shielded in every step," and carry it as you would a spell stone. Each time you glimpse it, touch it, or whisper it, you recharge your shield, reinforcing the link between mind and world. Invite community into the practice. In medieval times, charms were often shared, passed from traveler to traveler as blessings for safe passage. Today you can share your incantations in the comments below. Tell us the phrase that lights your path, or the mantra that steadies your hand. By weaving our words together, we form a network of living talismans, each one supporting the next. Finally, embrace the open mystery. Even after centuries of study, we have not uncovered every secret of spellcraft. There are glyphs yet untranslated, frequencies still unheard, and depths of intention yet unplumbed. This is not a flaw but an invitation, the edge of the map where your own exploration begins. Keep questioning, keep experimenting, and keep listening for the subtle responses of the world to your speech. As we close this chapter, remember that the greatest magic isn't hidden in distant tombs or secret libraries. It lives in your everyday words. Each time you speak with purpose, you wield a shield against doubt and a sword for transformation. Let language be your guardian, your ally and your compass through the uncharted territories of life. What incantation will you whisper to chart your course? Share your words, carry them close, and watch as your shield of language turns the tide of reality itself.